Today, we're looking at something pretty significant, a trend that's really been solidifying by 2025.
Yeah, this quiet exodus, you could call it.
Exactly. Of ultra-rich individuals, names you know, like Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, moving out of the United States. So our mission today is to unpack why. Why is this happening? And maybe more importantly, what does it mean for, for you, for America?
Right. Because it's not just about those famous names, is it? It goes deeper.
It feels like it's about control, freedom, how the super wealthy are trying to, well, future-proof things.
It really raises that central question. What's pushing them? Pushing them to look beyond the place historically called the land of opportunity. It seems much more complex than just, say, taxes.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because for decades, America was synonymous with huge wealth creation.
Absolutely. Silicon Valley, Wall Street, Hollywood.
Yeah, these wealth factories just churning out millionaires, billionaires. It felt like the ultimate playground for the ultra-rich, didn't it?
It really did. But that whole landscape, well, it started shifting pretty dramatically after 2020.
Oh, so?
Well, you had the pandemic policies, then rising inflation, the wealth gap discussions getting louder. It all sort of transformed the environment.
And by 2025, that transformation is quite visible.
Startlingly clear, actually. We're seeing data from places like Bloomberg and Forbes suggesting over 15% of U.S. billionaires have already moved part of their business or personal assets overseas.
15%, that's not insignificant.
Not at all. And there was this quote from an anonymous Silicon Valley executive really telling. He said, "This isn't just about taxes anymore. It's about control, freedom, and future-proofing."
So that really broadens it out. It's not just the bottom line.
Exactly. It signals a much deeper, maybe more strategic shift in thinking.
Okay, but let's talk about the money side first, because taxes are, well, the obvious place to start, right?
They're definitely a major factor. And the changes are pretty eye-opening.
Like what specifically?
Well, you've got several key states, California, New York, Illinois, bringing in laws that tax unrealized capital gains.
Okay, maybe break that down a bit. Unrealized gains.
Right, so imagine your stocks went way up in value, but you haven't sold them yet, just profit on paper.
Okay.
These new laws mean you could pay tax on that paper gain before you actually sell the stock, which is a pretty big departure from the traditional approach.
Wow, okay. That's different.
And on top of that, there are these proposed federal wealth taxes floating around, targeting folks with net assets over, say, $50 million. It's definitely a change in the air.
So faced with that, what are the immediate moves? What are people doing right now?
Well, initially, many played what some people are calling residency games, but, within the U.S.,
Meaning?
moving their legal home. To Florida, for instance, no state income tax there. Or Texas, known for being business-friendly.
Right. I've heard about Puerto Rico, too.
Exactly. Under certain laws, U.S. citizens can get 0% capital gains tax there. So people were making these domestic shifts.
But now you're saying for a growing number, that's not enough.
It seems not enough anymore, yeah.
Yeah.
That's pushing them to look really seriously at international options.
Okay, so that's the next step. What makes these international places so appealing that they'd actually, uproot? Where are they heading?
That's really the core of it, isn't it? And our research shows some clear patterns. The UAE, particularly Dubai, is a huge draw.
Why Dubai?
Zero income tax, for starters. Plus, world-class luxury, infrastructure, and really top-level security.
Oh, okay. Where else?
Singapore's another big one. It's got this reputation for high-tech infrastructure, political stability, and crucially low tax rates.
Makes sense.
Then you have places like Portugal. They have these golden visa programs, favorable tax setups that basically invited investment.
Right, the golden visas were popular.
Very. And for those maybe looking for something more remote, safe, natural living, New Zealand pops up a lot, almost like a modern sanctuary.
Like an escape.
Sort of. And don't forget the Caribbean nations. Places like St. Kitts and Nevis offer very fast citizenship if you make a significant investment.
So it really is a mix of factors: tax, lifestyle, stability, even just ease of getting citizenship.
It's definitely not just one thing. It points to a bigger picture.
Yeah, it sounds like there's more to it than just the numbers on a spreadsheet.
Absolutely. We spoke to a global wealth consultant based in London, and she put it very clearly. She said, they want freedom, privacy, and asset protection, and America just doesn't offer that anymore.
Wow. That's a pretty blunt assessment.
It is, and it really highlights this shift away from purely financial motives towards well, deeper concerns about lifestyle, security, personal freedom.
Which brings us neatly to another huge factor, something beyond just money, the political situation, political polarization.
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
I mean, since the Trump and Biden eras, the division in America feels, well, feels like it's at a record high, right? You see riots, protests, the media warfare is constant.
And alongside that, you've seen this growing sort of anti-billionaire sentiment filter into mainstream politics.
Right, and actual threats, or at least talk of wealth redistribution through new laws.
Exactly. And you have to think about how that feels if you're in that group. Some billionaires genuinely report feeling like targets.
Targets how?
Socially, legally, maybe even physically. There was this quote from an anonymous hedge fund manager, really stark. He said, "When people talk about eating the rich and Congress claps, you start thinking about your exit."
That's powerful. It suggests they're prioritizing personal and financial security over maybe traditional ideas of patriotism.
It looks like a choice for a certain kind of freedom, perhaps, over national loyalty, redefining what freedom actually means to them in this context.
And that feeling of being a target, that probably leads directly into safety and privacy concerns, too.
Absolutely. High-profile people or just very wealthy people are facing, real escalating threats.
Like what kind of threats?
Home invasions are reported more. Kidnapping threats. And then there's the whole issue of digital surveillance, which is just pervasive. It's a stark reality if you're in the public eye or if your wealth makes you visible.
Yeah, you can see how that would be unnerving.
For sure. And then you contrast that with places like, say, Dubai again or Switzerland. They often market VIP-level security and really strict privacy laws, sometimes specifically designed for high-net-worth individuals.
A safer bubble, perhaps.
In a way. And we're even seeing some take really extreme measures, building private compounds, stories about underground bunkers.
Bunkers. Seriously, where?
Places like New Zealand, even Montana, preparing for what they perceive as potential social collapse or major instability.
Wow. That's intense preparation. It really speaks volumes about how fragile they think the current system might be.
It does. It shows a deep-seated concern about the future, about stability.
So pulling this together, what does this look like as an overall strategy? It's clearly not just about leaving the U.S., is it? It sounds more calculated.
Exactly. It's much more sophisticated. Yeah. Think of it as a global diversification strategy, spreading the risk.
Okay, so what are the components of that?
Well, it involves several things. Acquiring multiple passports, often through those citizenship by investment programs we mentioned.
Right, having options.
Utilizing overseas banks, maybe moving into crypto-friendly jurisdictions, investing in real estate, but in diverse emerging economies.
And managing their wealth differently.
Yes, often setting up or using family offices abroad.
Can you explain what a family office abroad is, quickly?
Sure. It's basically a private wealth management firm, but it's dedicated precisely. There's that saying, right, you don't want all your eggs in one flag. That really captures the mindset, building resilience, flexibility in what feels like a pretty volatile world.
Which inevitably brings up the big question, what happens to America when its richest people start pulling out, or at least diversifying so heavily away from it? What are the impacts?
Yeah, that's the critical point.
Yeah.
And the potential consequences are, well, they're significant and pretty wide-ranging.
Such as?
Job creation could take a hit. These individuals are often major investors, founders.
Innovators, too.
Right. Philanthropy could also decline. A lot of nonprofits, universities, arts organizations rely heavily on donations from the ultra-wealthy.
Okay. And the government's perspective?
Tax revenue. It would inevitably drop, right? Puts a strain on public services, infrastructure, everything. And maybe even innovation itself could slow down if that top-tier capital and maybe the entrepreneurial drive seeks opportunities elsewhere.
So you could end up with a kind of brain drain plus wealth drain scenario.
That's the fear. If the U.S. doesn't find that balance, that sweet spot between, let's say, economic fairness and maintaining an environment that supports and attracts entrepreneurial freedom, that's a real risk.
Is there a concern that America might be losing that entrepreneurial edge, the thing that made it the land of dreams?
There's definitely a concern among some observers that the climate is becoming less welcoming, potentially driving away the very people who once saw it as the ultimate place to build something big.
So the multi-billion-dollar question then, could this trend reverse? Is this exodus permanent?
That really is the big question, isn't it? And the answer probably depends on several factors.
What kind of conditions would need to change in the U.S. for that to happen?
You'd likely need to see some significant shifts. Maybe reforming tax laws to be perceived as more stable or predictable. restoring some sense of political unity or at least reducing the extreme polarization.
On the safety aspect.
Yeah, creating a greater sense of safety and stability for wealth creators, addressing those concerns about being targets.
And if those conditions aren't met, what's the alternative future look like?
Well, the implication is we might see the continued rise of this new global class of nomadic billionaires.
Nomadic billionaires.
Yeah, individuals who are increasingly disconnected from any single nation, living more in digital shadows perhaps, shifting their base of operations, their assets, their residency as the global winds change, less tied to any one flag.
It's a fascinating and maybe slightly unsettling picture of the future, which brings us to a final thought, maybe for you listening. If you had the means, truly vast means, and you face these kinds of pressures we've discussed, the taxes, the politics, the safety concerns, would you also consider moving your wealth, or maybe even yourself, out of America?
It's a challenging question. But understanding this trend, why it's happening, well, it helps all of us grasp the really complex forces that are shaping not just global economies, but societies too.
Whether you're a billionaire yourself or just trying to understand the world we live in, it's definitely something to think about.